Hello, everyone. This is your host, Pranav. Welcome and thanks for joining us again for part 2. We are picking up right where we left off in part 1. I hope that you enjoyed it so far. So please stay tuned as we continue further on this episode. One thing which I would like to mention, it's a little bit funny. Uh, this garden weed is sort of a thing in Europe and I think in India as well. When people are really bothered about it. I myself, I have a front garden where like a lot of weed grows, garden weed, and there's a general term for the weed. It. So if I go by the literal definition, weed is some kind of a plant which is growing at a place where it should not be growing. So that's a weed, and it looks definitely odd. Maybe you have a beautifully landscaped summer garden, and then suddenly some messy green grass is growing, which looks a bit of odd from rest of the setting, and people get annoyed by that. But I think that's one very basic thing to think, like nature is actually trying to find to restore itself in its own ways. And I think that is first step of realizing the 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 importance or like the existence of permaculture, the whole ecosystem. Would you like to add something to this?
Yes, I can always talk about weeds because I really dislike this term. I think it's very derogatory of us to use it.
Yeah.
And no, a weed is not something which is growing where it shouldn't grow. I mean, we need to also understand if a certain plant is growing aggressively on a piece of land. If it's naturally growing aggressively on a piece of land, then it also means that that land is lacking in certain nutrients which this plant has and will transfer down to the soil. That is why the healthier your soil, the lesser weeds you will see. The like in my garden, when I used to have one, now that I keep on traveling so much, I have multiple gardens in different places in India, but I'm not
Wow.
living stationary in one place. But when I used to, in my garden, and I maybe did weeding once every 6 months, and that too not removing it all, just, little bits here and there. And there was no need because my garden was densely planted. There were in 9 meter by 5 meter patch. I was growing more than 40 different kinds of vegetables, and it was just happily growing. And it also meant that I give space for the wheat to grow. So it's not about, again, what is this aesthetic where we define what's beautiful and what's not? Like, it just, I think human minds playing tricks because how come manicured lawns, those American lawns are beautiful, which is like horrible. It takes up the grass, takes up so much of water and so much of maintenance, and you're like cutting it. You're just making it boxed and you're containing it in a shape versus something which is naturally growing in the landscape and is growing because it's an indicator. It's trying to tell you what is lacking in the soil. And I think these are little things, again, as you said, that nature really tries to communicate, and that's how it does it. In Europe, it's probably, I mean, because permaculture specifically has become very big there.
Yeah.
And also with my experience, I think people are a lot more open because I mean, people have gardens, right? Here, what has happened, either you are in villages that you can afford to have your own small or big patches of land and then grow your own crops, or have a small gardens. In cities, it's not very common. Like right now, I am in Delhi, and I had some project with a resettlement colony, doing some of the park restorations there. And my house luckily has a big garden, and that was the reason, like, I had to struggle a lot before settling down on a house for 2 months, that, oh, I need to have green space, but you cannot afford to have it here. So people just don't have that awareness, where mulching is something we talk about, we swear by in permaculture, that it's the most important thing. Nature doesn't make compost, it makes the leaves fall down. But here, specifically, like with the communities, be it in villages or cities that I've worked with, also we realized that they don't mulch because they're afraid of snakes crawling inside, and then they clean it up. So even outside, like if there's one tree standing outside in your courtyard, you would every day sweep around that tree, take off the topsoil layer, you're taking off all the nutrients, which you're taking off all the carbon material, which is dropping down in form of leaves and twigs and dry leaves in the nitrogen material, of course. So we have this concept of clean and beautiful, and you know this grass is not okay, or this shrub is not all right, and we really need to, I urge everybody, we really need to look at our definition of beauty. It's the same thing that women need to dress a certain way for them to be accounted as beautiful, or objectified as something to be desired for. Like we, or men need to behave a certain way. So we do it to ourselves, and then we do it to the plants also. That's a very sad state of the world, where I just don't know. I find it bizarrely funny that how can something which gives you flowers is pretty, but the other plant which has a lot more shade is not pretty.
Yeah, there's a very interesting thing my friend says. He says, which is a very obvious thing for a lot of us. He says that we are, as a human on this earth, because of nature. Nature is not because of us. And it
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense, with what we are discussing. And that kind of awareness and respect, I must say, should be there for having things around our houses, or trying to make our way, or the construction in such a way that nature does finds its way in the surrounding. And things like mulching and everything is so important. I agree.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it is just, I think we are wired in a different way. Again, we cannot pinpoint one thing. I think it's
Yeah.
the entire system,
Yeah.
multiple systems which have been wronged on so many levels, that we sit with the crisis in the world which we are sitting, be it the food crisis, be it water crisis. I mean, there are still places where you don't have enough water. And what you mentioned, that, yeah, permaculture, so there are 12 principles of permaculture which are very fascinating. You can visit the permaculture's website. I think it's www.permaculture.com. And you could really read about these principles and understand that how fascinating it is to see how it covers it all. Like it says, produce no waste. It says, obtain any a yield. It says, problem is the solution. It's just so slow and steady. It says, renew to use renewable energy and understand the renewable energy. It talks about slow solutions, and it's just so fascinating, and so crazily big, that even rainwater harvesting, what you mentioned, that's very true. If all of us in our houses are conscious that, okay, how much water am I using for even taking one shower, it's as simple as that, or one single flush which we do after using the restroom, how much of water is going there. I think the more we become conscious over these things, the world can we still have some scope of improving lives by numbers, because we are living, either, I mean, we are definitely not living in the world of abundance, we are living in the world of crisis, which is not its natural state. if you wouldn't have abundance, you will also not have crisis. Maybe sometimes you would have crisis, but this is very bizarre. Like the resettlement colony where I was working with, they still don't have water connection. They don't get good water. So the tankers are coming, and this is like 2023 in Delhi, near the west border of Delhi. They have water tankers coming so that the entire colony, entire blocks after blocks run after the tank to fill up whatever containers they have. The water isn't clean and it's miserable. Like, um, how and why? The crisis we are having is not because of nature. The crisis we are having is because of our own interventions to nature. And then how do we bring it back? Awareness is one way to go about it, but I also don't think preaching something is a great way to go about things, because and that's something you'd also asked, right? So if we preach a lot, people don't listen, and fair enough. Why would you believe something which
Yeah.
somebody else is saying? uh, so I think it's only by setting up multiple examples and living lives the way the world tells us is not possible, we might be able to inspire some. As sad as it sounds, I don't think there is one go, one stop, quick solution to fix the mess which we have created. And it's only by doing things. Right and wrong is not are not the words I like to use, but it's only by doing things which we do, which define our moments of life, is how we could change. Like how one person could clean up the beach in Bombay by just doing that every day speaks volumes. Or the guy who planted near Sundarbans,
Yeah.
he made a forest there. And I think we really need to set those examples, and maybe somebody finds.
Or maybe some terrace farms, or like terrace gardens, let's say. I try to follow some of the content that's available online. Brilliant examples, I must say. People are quite optimistic about these things, and there's always motivation that one can take from others. And staying positive, I think, is the key, right? Uh,
I agree.
and another
Also
thing,
understand we are a minority, and might end up being a minority only because most of the people won't spend 2 hours talking about nature probably.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's another sad part of it. But I believe, like, always going back into the history, as you were also mentioning about, it's already known to our ancestors, or indigenous, was always there, these kind of things. It's just like, very recently these things have pumped up for a lot of reason. It could be um, many parameters related to greed, or something with primarily, I think it's very much associated with greed, and then fulfilling the needs for the bigger population. I think there's always an excuse which comes that it is to serve the bigger population. It's not only about India. I think the worldwide, you talk about this problem, like, why are we not going organic? Okay, there are a lot of problems associated with it, but definitely there is a parameter called population which needs to be fed. Comes as an excuse. But I would like to mention some examples that I could recall. Like, for example, we were talking about the rainwater harvesting for Chand Bawdi. I hear always about it. In Rajasthan, there are the
Hmm.
steps where they try to slow down the water. And I think this kind of concepts are also in a lot of step farms. I'm not sure. You were mentioning about Kerala. Uh, can
Hmm?
can you find some examples there? If yes, you can mention. But for example, this was an example, and other than that, I um, spoke to an elder in my family. So it's just like one generation above. And he was mentioning about not throwing away the seed, after you consume a food. And it was so practical and wonderful to hear that even it was not that far, that people actually had a sense to give back to the nature a certain proportion that you take from it. So, for example, if I'm consuming some fruit, and I would try to put the seed back somewhere in the soil, wherever it's possible. Uh, uh, it's not about whether you have placed it right or wrong. It's just the hope. I think that is a big key, because, for example, if you, as a person, are consuming a lot of fruits, and whatever fruit it is, if you plant, let's say, 15 or 20 seeds, and even one is successful, you did give back a bit to the nature, and that plant must be living somewhere,
Hmm.
and not just throwing away the seed in the garbage, which a lot of us do these days, not thinking about, what it could have become in the future. And
Yeah.
yeah, so such kind of small things were always there, and the sense of having kitchen gardens and things, I think they were always there, if we look back in our textbooks, or maybe hear the stories from our parents or grandparents, the times they were living in. It was not that far in the future that there was a sense of uh, consumption pattern, how much you should take from the nature, what should you give it back as well, things like that. And it's very recent, I must say, we are seeing this as a trouble. So that's why I'm also trying to have a conversation to find more answers, have more dots that we can connect to at least find a direction, where we are all heading. When we talk about awareness, it's not just having like a lecture, but trying to also connect, different angles, different points, different experiences. I, coming from a background, I have done nothing, just thinking and talking about it. I do apply a few things in my garden, but I plan to do it more and more in the future, which are based on such principles, where I can contribute. But yeah, so just wanted to mention, like, these things were probably already in consideration, not that far. Yeah,
Hmm. Yeah, I think, no, I don't think, but the thing is that we need to also understand that the our ancestors, they were very much connected to the soil, which also means you intuitively know and understand how things behave underground. Maybe they would not be able to scientifically decipher it all, but they understood, right? And the reason they understood was because when they were born in the soil, they played in that soil, they ate that soil when they were little children, and they had this very special connection with the plants, with the soil. They could understand plants. We, on the other hand, I mean, not we, but people who are born and brought up in cities right now, not that it's much different in villages also today, but we also need to take in consideration the city life is so hectic and its
yeah.
own, that how are you going to find that connect back? It can only happen if, something in your head blasts open your consciousness and you go like, oh, I've been living wrong my whole life and I need to change something, which happens with a lot of people. But it's like a lot of people don't even know where their food is coming from, as you were mentioning. Especially, okay, if we talk about Europe, most of the food, how bizarre it is that you're able to get the bananas and avocados when, okay, avocados, all right, it grows in Portugal and Spain, in some places, but but
There's
you
another angle to it. I was also in the farmers market trying to understand, how this fresh stuff is coming. So there's also a lot of big companies involved, where they have their, big farm set up. So, for example, a company is somewhere from the colder region, but they still
Mm.
manage to put enough money and workforce behind it. So they would buy the farms in Spain or Portugal, have them work, and still very much monoculture. And that again, like, kind of works in the very similar way. It's nothing very natural or organic, I think.
No, but yeah, but then again, this is the thing which we also need to understand. Like, wherever I live, I mean, since I also keep on traveling so much, I make it to a point that I would only eat local food, which is locally grown food. And that is again something very important. It doesn't happen in our consciousness. Like, why would I eat avocados in India, for say? Okay, they grow in Kodaikanal and some other cold places. I mean, even in Oroville, where I live, we have some avocado trees, but they're not delicious avocados. So if I have to eat avocados, okay, and what are the foods which are naturally rich for my own body, where again depends on where you were born, where you belong to. Those are the foods which are going to do the best to your body. There's a reason why foods are have such diversity in the cultures worldwide, right? Same as with the yeah, it just, I think it's about this awareness, this presence with earth, which is not there. If you live in a concrete building, go out in an air conditioned taxi or a car, go to a supermarket and buy packaged food all the time, come back home, work on your laptops. If you're living the conventional life, how where will you find that connection? Then the only places you find the connections is, like you said, if you go for hikes, or if you would go for you know some nature walk, some farm walk, and you will be
Yeah.
fascinated by it, but then you come back to your regular life. So I
Very
think,
sad.
but
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
great. It's great if you're going for hikes, not you, but if somebody's going for hikes and getting the sense of understanding nature, maybe someday it will change. But yeah, but all the indigenous cultures, all the cultures, they've always had the engineering, the social engineering, and the environmental engineering is something which has existed inside of us, because we as humans also play a great role of a destroyer in the ecosystem.
Yeah.
Just like the elephants, they play the role of the destroyer to balance the ecosystem. We also do that. We have imbalanced it now by misusing our power a bit too much. But if you again look at our ancestors, there were, so Chan Bauri is one example, but you'll have multiple ponds, lake, different types of well systems, different types of water recharge pits, different types of erosion control mechanisms, cabions, dry walls, which were made for, constructing homes, fencing, which had a lot of plants which would grow taller. And fencing is also a relatively new concept, because we only realize it now that we need to have boundaries. But they knew these things. They would make these creeks where the water could flow. A lot of it is human made. When we were talking about Kerala, you have these entire backwater channels which were
Yeah.
made long time back, and they were the trade route for the yeah, for the spices, if I'm not wrong. Maybe I am wrong about it, but there was a lot, it was the traders way for some things. And yeah, like, so there are examples. We don't even need to go and think out of the box. I think that's again, the more educated we become, the more sophisticated solutions we want to find. But the solutions are really simple. Bill Mollison, the founder of permaculture, has said something so beautiful, and I swear by it. He says, though the problems of the world are increasingly complex, the solutions remain embarrassingly simple. And
Wow.
that is extremely correct. If you know, I mean, and this is something I always say, in the hypothetical world, I say, if all the farmers collectively decide that they're only going to feed their families and friends, and they won't supply food to your superstores are going to, superstore is it's called, right? The market with
Yeah.
the
Superstore, supermarket. I
supermarket, yeah.
understand.
So supermarkets would run out of food, and then half of the world is just going to collapse, because they don't even know where their food's coming from or how to grow their own food.
Yeah.
Half of the world is not aware where the trash they throw out of their house, how and where it's being dumped. I mean, the landfills are increasing by masses, like it's bizarrely scary. that is causing so much of methane release, and it's all impacting, right? I mean, this is again like it's such a vicious cycle. We enter through permaculture and then we talk about all things possible.
Yeah.
And then again, the awareness is not there, the responsibility is not there, there's a lot of delusion. So I think as great as permaculture is as a tool, it again comes down to consumerism and choices we make as people to really be able to change something. Because if that wouldn't happen, there would always be minorities trying to change the surroundings around them, and very successfully so in one way or the other. I mean, now we also look at so many eco villages, which are practicing a lot of natural agriculture practices, be it permaculture, be it biodynamic, be it syntropic agroforestry, be it agroforestry. So there's a lot happening, be it Vedic agriculture. I mean, Vedic agriculture and biodynamic are almost the same things, but uh, what is the extent of it really diversifying and increasing? Very little impact if we really consider the masses. So in some ways, we have a lot of power as human beings, and as public, we just don't know how to use that power, and we also are very corrupt that we don't want to understand it. So I think if as long as in totality we all don't take responsibility for our own actions, and that action is also about, okay, if it's raining, what's happening to the water which is falling in your house? Are you even trying to save it? When you're washing your clothes, how many liters of water you're wasting, and could you minimize that? Or if you have a balcony, why don't you put up some plants? Maybe plant a zucchini, at least harvest some food, understand the mechanism of how soil works. I find it very bizarre that there are people very fascinated to grow plants, and then they see an earthworm and freak out.
Yeah.
And that's also there, so you have all sorts of people, they just, and then you tell them that, oh, but do you even understand what this earthworm is doing? You're literally eating food which grows through its poop. and and that connection is not, so if there wasn't this earthworm, your soil wouldn't be as good as it is, so you wouldn't have food. But so we also need to also understand, like, what is the level of consciousness when we are talking with people. And one way of awareness is definitely to talk and to preach and leave. The other is to hold their hand, speak to them in the language they understand, and slowly build it up. But then again, that becomes a slow process. So if again it all comes down to having bigger stakeholders who can get involved. They wouldn't, probably, because they have their own selfish agendas, which are bigger than all these problems. I mean, also in this day and age where climate crisis is the way it is. I mean, there's a heat wave going in Paris right now. A friend of mine just messaged.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
It's just
really
32
crazy.
degrees. Of course, it becomes a heat wave here. But yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Of course, it's abnormal. It's not natural, and of course, the houses, the way they are built here, are not really ready for such kind of rising temperatures. What happens is a lot of heat gets trapped,
yeah.
and that's where the whole problem starts.
Yeah, I mean, fair enough. And why is nobody prepared? Because nobody anticipated it would happen. Okay, scientists have been warning for years. Even in 1950s and 60s, they were writing these things that climate crisis is real. Nobody pays attention. But now we are living amidst a lot of chaos. And again, tools like permaculture, tools like organic farming, tools like sustainable practices of self-sustainability practices, they play a crucial role. But it all really narrows down to people being open to it or not, and the way we approach them, right? I mean, not everybody will change, but even if they change one habit about themselves, I again think That's the positive way to look about it, that okay, if you're consuming or if you're producing so much of trash, maybe you produce one bag less trash every week. You
Absolutely.
just become conscious of. So I think smaller practices can cause long term benefit, but not the practices which come all of a sudden and feels like a systemic change, but then the sooner it comes,
Yeah.
like with the bang that it comes, it also goes. So yeah, it would be really interesting to see. Like, I really look forward to seeing how permaculture as a movement now in India also, it's gaining a lot of popularity, both good and bad. You know what I mean? Like, once anything becomes commercialized, it loses its essence. So that I also see happening a lot with permaculture, and how it's still like there are a lot of it's a very, I don't want to say it, I don't want to sound politically wrong, but it's a very white movement still. If you see, if you look at it, the kind of course which is offered, only if you have money is when you can afford to have the luxury of understanding permaculture.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily the people who have money who need to understand permaculture, because okay, who are passionate, great, but it is people who are living at the grassroots level, it's the people who are living in the remotest of areas, they need to start respecting their ancestral knowledge. And if that is backed by people they look up to, that is going to bring a change,
Yeah.
because they are the ones who are basically a lot more knowledgeable than me, you, and many of us combined, because they still live that life. They're still so hardworking, and they still have that connection. So I think, again, like, finding a way to encourage and empower those people who have direct connection with earth, so that they don't lose their connection, and they feel rather inspired to continue their connection and add more of their family members to it, because that is again a very big, the farmer's son doesn't want to become a farmer anymore. Okay, if this farmer has hundreds of acres of land and is making lots of profit by monoculture, then maybe the son will take it up. But any small farmer's son is not wanting to be a farmer, and that's very sad. And then who's going to become the farmer? People like us, we won't become farmers. Like, we don't have it in us, that kind of hard work. Even if city people, which a lot of us in India, a lot of IT people have realized that it's not their calling to work in IT, and then they go back to farming life. What they do is they hire locals, which are then digging, making waterworks, earthworks, what and what not. And they are working. So these people are still not, maybe they'll plant a tree once in a while, but you're still not doing that every day. So it is people who really have that kind of wisdom, knowledge, and strength to do, should be empowered by multiple channels, and then making the people who are living the exact opposite life aware by interacting with them in the way which resonates with them, and then slowly changing that ecosystem. Because I believe, I mean, change is evident, it will happen. Climate change is also very evident, it had to happen anyways. It's just happening at a much faster pace, and we wouldn't know how to deal with it. And I really believe that, okay, if we don't learn it by now, nature is not going to go anywhere. This planet has existed, and we are such tiny freckles that we would be over if we don't really learn from our mistakes. I mean, as sad as it sounds, it doesn't even make me feel sad when I say it. We don't deserve to be alive, also, because I just think, nature will hit back at us. We are not the center of attraction.
Absolutely
We
right.
like to believe that we are, but we are not. I
Yeah,
mean,
rightly said. I think nature has all the force and power to take it all back and reset it. But that would be very harsh for us, unfortunately.
but I don't know if it would be harsh for us. I think we are demanding it, right? So we would end up with things which we deserve, most probably. The only thing which is unfair is that the people who cause the most destruction are the ones who don't get impacted by it.
Mm.
And it is again the marginalized communities in the world which are suffering the repercussions of anything natural. Because, I mean, it doesn't happen that a prime minister of any country is going to, they are okay. It's not happening that a billionaire is going to, get trapped in some place and, not be alive anymore. But it would happen with people who are already living lives which are a lot more difficult. So I think that ways, yes, it is unfair, but I mean, are we really learning from our mistakes? We aren't. When COVID happened, you see, we saw so much of wildlife thriving again. And
Yeah.
then what? Everybody started praising what was happening on Instagram, on Twitter, on all these platforms. But then once COVID went back, everyone continued with the regular lives. And so it's really like, we didn't really learn, and we don't. We see it, we appreciate it, but then the moment's gone, and then we are again back to our delusional selves. So till the time that questioning within is not there, I don't think things can change. Either that, or some very big corporation decides. If Coca-Cola decides to shut off and leave the business and donate all its money and feed the hungry, and make all the farmers in the world slowly organic, great, but they're not going to do that.
Yeah.
And if we still continue buying what they're selling,
Yeah.
then, I mean, great, jokes on us. Feeding ourselves with poison, do that. Then we think life is harsh. Then I don't know. I don't know if life is harsh. I think we make it very harsh for ourselves.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. It's rightly put. It's a sad reality, but yeah. So I think if I have to put it all together in a way, it would be very nice to also know what has been your journey specifically. Like, we can keep it brief, and maybe we can discuss it more in detail in other episodes. Because I think there are many layers to it, right? This is just, we are maybe scratching the surface. Um, so, what has been your journey in solving the problems, and so what were the pluses and what were the minus or the challenges that you faced uh, trying to bring this change? Because that would serve as a very good story and also as a motivation for someone who is, trying to seek some motivation from. Also, I think a lot of points that you mentioned around the seasonal fruits and soil. I think we could definitely dig deeper into it in the following episodes. Also, it would be interesting that how, as an individual, uh, which is who is not having a lot of space, can start really small, following these principles, and also the aspects of like living a city life, sort of a reflection of a lot of us thinking that cities really are the place where you have opportunities, which in a way it's very true. A lot of people leave their hometowns, like small cities or maybe villages, how they could be brought back to the way they were, starting little by little. I think this we as a community has to come together. In my opinion, we have to start maybe from our kitchen garden, so whatever space we have, even on the terrace or nearby the public parks or any open grounds. Uh, Things like that, but we can cover those in the future episodes. Very much looking forward to that, but very curious to hear in brief your journey. What challenges did you face, and what were the big pluses you can really be proud of? I mean, the whole journey is being proud of, I think, but mostly which really made you feel satisfied. uh,
Hmm.
so far. Very
So
curious
far.
to know. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. First, I would start by saying true permaculture is such a broad, I mean, because also this was our first conversation. I like to bring in all the aspects because I think it's important for us to talk about these things, but each of the subjects can be deep dived into for, I don't know, really, really long. Yeah, it's just like so abundant and so diverse. It can never be collected in one or two or three or 100 or 200. I don't know. it's
Mm-hmm.
it's it's continuous life learning, right? My journey so far, I would say I feel very blessed. It has been amazing. You ask about challenges. I do want to say that there have been challenges, but I've not found them challenging enough to stop me yet. And that's a very good thing. So, there are challenges in terms of resistance when you're working with people. There are challenges in terms of animals when you're working on restoring a lost forest. There are challenges in terms of connecting with the community when we are working with any community, be it the farmer community, be it the underprivileged community, whatever communities that we tag and work with. So the challenges are always how do you belong with them, because there's a very clear segregation, right? So again, the challenges are more social than anything. It's not challenging that, okay, if the soil is not okay, then how do I make it happen? Okay, that's the skill I have, so I can make it happen. And that's not even the skill, that's the ultimate reality of soil. That's the truth. If you're intuitive enough, you understand how to do it. It's not some rocket science which I know and you cannot know. You also have it in you the same way I have it in me. Maybe somebody else has it a bit more layered, so they need to peel the layers before understanding it, and that's all. But mostly the challenges have been the social challenges. Finances play again a big part if we are working with with some people, because funding is something which gets challenging, right? You do have a lot of funding out there, but then to actually implement it, you don't get enough funding. And then people who want to fund, or corporations who want to fund, have their own hidden agenda. So how do you stay pure with the intentions that you have to work with, versus negotiate something which they want they want to do? Anyways, yeah, so I just wanted to say those are the challenges in terms of the natural challenges. I wouldn't say are, I mean, they are very challenging, but they are fun challenges to work with. If this is a land which has a very high slope, and then there's erosion, and those are the things which excite anybody who's working with ecology and who's working with permaculture, who's working with restoring any sort of ecosystem, because there, that makes you think creatively, that makes you try and experiment with certain things. Social challenges are very difficult, where people are not open to also sometimes receive what you're saying. Fair enough. No judgment for them to not being open, because we come from outside and we tell them, hey, this is the way, life is better, so you need to listen to us. Why should they? um, Success, I think in my earlier years, it used to really bother me that, oh, so much of efforts we put, but you don't get in response a lot of positive response. People don't change. And then one of my teachers said that, I've been working 30 years, and out of these 30 years, I've only managed to change 10% of the entire village, but I think that is enough. And uh, and I think for me also now, even if one person changes their life or something in their life, by somehow getting influenced by the work, not necessarily I'm doing, but the good work of any kind which is happening around, that is satisfying. Out of 200 people, if even one person changes one thing about their life, that is the seed rightly sown. Then that person will continue changing multiple things about their lives, and then they will become the inspiration for many others. So I think that ripple effect is happening. It's it just happens, like somebody who inspired me to then initiate me into this journey. It just continues to happen, right? But it's not going to be a lot of people. Maybe with some people there can be a lot of people. So I think if we don't carry a lot of expectations, great. And even if one person, 10 people, one village changes, I think that already is a great start, because the change only starts, right, with small steps. Big steps we don't have in our control. I mean, we as human beings, on our own or with the small organizations, we cannot think of conquering the world and changing it. Let's leave that for the big organizations which are trying to do that anyways. What we can do is bring small, slow and steady solutions. And yeah, and that has been, I mean, I would not trade my life for anything else in the world, because I feel very lucky to live and to be able to even breathe in through these challenges and then somehow overcome them, sometimes not, also sometimes miserably fail, sometimes find a negotiating ground, but it all makes you learn and understand. And then your approach becomes a bit more nuanced when you deal with another community or when you're dealing with another landscape. So yeah, social challenges, not so much of natural challenges, I would say.
Yeah, very inspirational to hear. And also, I would say, yeah, hearing the stories from our parents or grandparents was not that far. Maybe it's a matter of a couple of years or decades, like that consciousness would probably come back. And there is a term a lot of people use these days, it's collective consciousness. And I think efforts are there. It's not like uh, people are not aware of permaculture. A lot of people do here. It's just about that time, I think the drop by drop, like collective efforts that are being put, I think they will never go to waste. Just trying to be very positive about this thing, because I take it as something. For example, like if someone was so much following the rules of nature a couple of decades back, and now we are in the decade where a lot of people are just a little bit foggy in their heads about the understanding of nature. It shouldn't be that much to reverse it till the time we all stay positive and work towards the bigger goal.
Hmm.
And always, big organizations are just names. I think we are how many, 7 or 8 billion people on this earth.
Yeah,
I might
now
be
8
wrong.
billion. I think 8 billion and counting, because we wouldn't
Yeah,
know the exact number.
I think that's a bigger volume than just the bigger organizations. So there are many, many details. I think we should more discuss in the future episodes for sure. It was a pleasure to have you. I think we are almost reaching to the end of this episode. It was a pleasure to have you, Harshita. Really inspirational to hear your story and so many details. Means a lot. I hope to see you again in the coming episodes. Is there anything else you would like to mention?
No, no, I think we talked a lot. It was a lot of content for today. So let people also absorb it. And yeah, no, I'll be open to deep diving more specifically about permaculture, if that is something which can be of interest to multiple people. Yeah, it's just, I think it's important to understand how big it is, and then we could again retract to understanding the more specifics of anything. But no, it was great to be on board. It's really late in India now.
Yeah, I know.
But
Thanks for being patient and
no, I apologize, because I really wanted to give you time, and then my project was just not giving me enough space to breathe.
no, no, no.
So,
Like,
and then I'm traveling tomorrow onwards again. So I was like, okay, I have only today. Let me just get through. Get
yeah, I try to steal time as and when possible. That's how I work on this project, connecting with people and yeah, bringing out a lot of interesting conversations. But before we end, like, would you like to mention some resources or books, I think you mentioned a lot of in the mid of the conversation, but like maybe few, two, three, four, some books you would like to mention.
Sure. So, with respect to permaculture,
Yeah.
I mean, there is this designer's manual by Bill Mollison, which is the Bible, literally. It has it all. It's super amazing. Then Fukuoka's book, One Straw Revolution, is another book which is just so fascinating and really inspiring. So these are two books which I really, really recommend. Then you have Sepp Holzer and others, but I think when you understand and start with Masanobu Fukuoka, because it's written in a very simple language, it's the layman's language, and that is something I really like um, about his way of writing, because it shouldn't be as complicated that it needs somebody very sophisticated to read and understand. It should be something which is understood by multiple people. So yeah, that there is a very beautiful book on, it's not related to permaculture, but it is by this Buddhist Zen master called Thich Nhat Hanh, and that says it's a book about the world we have. So the book is called The World We Have, and because he was a Zen master and an activist, and so that's another very beautiful book which you should read. There's another book called The Sacred Life of Trees, which is amazing. It speaks of the connections the trees have and how the mycelium is connecting the entirety of the plant world, and that is another, like, wow, it's so fascinating, and that's magical to also read. So yeah, these are some books which you could start with. Then there's Gaia's Hypothesis. I think that's what it's called. I read it quite some time back. Sir Albert Howard's book on, am I remembering the name? I don't remember the name, but there's this book by Sir Albert Howard on agriculture, which is also very nice. Then there is there's this book by Charles Eisenstein also. I think Sacred Geometry. It's called. Sacred Economics, I think. That's also another great one. I mean, all connected. And if you really want to have this anger in you and understand and change the world, Derek Jensen's Endgame is amazing. All 4 volumes. It's really cool. So sorry, you asked for 2. I gave. I don't
Wow.
know many.
No, that's awesome. I think if you have more references, I will add it in the description of this episode later on. I think we'll stay connected on this.
Yeah.
But again, thanks for your time, Harshita.
Thank
Really means
you.
a lot. Hope we connect again in the future
I
for
hope
the
so
more
too.
episodes.
Thank you for giving me this platform. Have a
Yeah.
good evening or night.
You
It
too.
is for you also now.
Yeah, it's 21:40. So
Mhm.
yeah,
All
but
right.
it's thank you so much again. Have
Thank you.
a good night. Cheers. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Hello, everybody. I hope you liked this episode. If you have any particular request or any feedback, please feel free to write it in the comment box, or you can write it to our email, mapsandmetaphors@gmail.com. Also, I would request you to please consider clicking that subscribe button. It gives us a lot of motivation. Also, please like and share this video so that it reaches to the wider community. Thank you so much.